Hello and welcome to Faithfully Stampin' with Jennifer Helm. I am Jennifer Helm, the Faithful Stamper, and I'm an independent demonstrator with Stampin' Up. Today I have for you a quick and simple technique based on a 6x6 sheet of paper. Now, I recently did another video using a 6x6 sheet of paper, but that one is very different from this one tonight. I've never seen a technique particularly like this one, which is one reason I was so excited to share it. The 6x6 technique I shared last week was where we took one piece of 6x6 paper like this and we made 4 cards out of different pieces that we cut out. Today what we are going to do is make 1 card and 1 envelope using a complete piece of 6x6 paper. We're going to have a minute amount of waste. I'll show you that when we get to that point. But I love it because I'm drowning in paper. I'm a paper hoarder. I hate to cut it, and so I'm trying my hardest to use up more of my pretty paper. And I love that I can take a 6x6 square and use the whole thing on a project, or I can take a 12x12 and cut it down to 6x6 and then do all my cutting at once and make 4 cards of the same design at one time very, very quickly. So I'm going to share with you how we're going to do that. And the paper I am using is from the Delightfully Eclectic 12x12 Designer Series paper set in our annual catalog. This is one of my favorite sets because it is 48 sheets of paper. It's a whopper set, and you get 4 of each of the designs. So if you want, you could take all 4 of the same print and use this technique and knock out a whole lot of cards really quickly at one time. So if you do not have a demonstrator you are currently working with and you would like to see a paper copy of our catalog, please feel free to get in touch with me either through the comments here or on my Facebook page at The Faithful Stamper. I'd be happy to mail you a catalog. I'm more of a paper copy catalog in your hands because I like to drool all over it and look at all the pretty things. So I'm happy to help you out with that if you are too. And if you're an online shopper, then be sure to check me out here at thefaithfulstamper.stampinup.net, and be sure to check out our kits page and our online exclusives page. Those are items that we do not have in the catalog, but you'll find exclusively online. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. If you have your camera handy, get ready to take a screenshot because we are going to cut our paper like this. I made a template so you can kind of see. So if you've got your camera, go ahead and take a picture. I do apologize. I cannot give credit to this idea to the original creator. She didn't put her name on the picture that I saved, and so I'm really sorry. Not my original idea, but a great one that I wanted to share with you. So we are going to take the 6x6 paper and cut off a portion for the envelope, and then I'll walk you through the rest. I will share pictures of these over on my Facebook page if you want to check it out there as well. All right, so let's get started. I'm going to grab my paper trimmer. One of my favorite things is that there is not complicated cutting or folding to this technique. It is simply some basic cutting and assembly. So I'm going to take my 6x6 paper and line it up at the 3 3/4 inch mark and cut. This piece here is my envelope flap, and I'm going to set it to the side. One thing I forgot to mention is for the first time that you make this card, I highly recommend using a print like this that is non-directional, meaning that you can turn it around any way and it works the same. I'll explain a little bit later how directional paper comes into play. You have to be more mindful of how you cut it because, for example, if it's directional and you cut it the wrong way, whatever you have on your envelope flap might be sideways. So I'll show you more about that later. Okay, so next we're going to take this panel here and we're going to turn it sideways and cut 1 inch off the bottom. So this is going to give us a strip that is 1 by 3 3/4. This is going to be for the inside of my card, and we'll talk more about that later. Then I'm going to rotate it back. So the narrow side is at the top. I'm going to line it up at 1 inch on the right side of my cutter. So basically I'm just taking an inch off. It doesn't really matter which side you take it off of. And that gives me these 2 pieces. The larger one I'm going to slide out of the way for a minute. And this narrow one I'm going to turn sideways and take 1 1/2 inches off. So that gives me 2 little strips. And then this longer one I'm going to rotate sideways again and cut another inch off the bottom so that I have these two, and that leaves me 4 pieces. And when you lay them all together, we're almost like reassembling a little puzzle. We're gonna put these on a card front. So I pulled all my colors out of this designer series paper today. To start, I have my card base, which is Bubble Bath, 5.5 by 8.25. No, 8.5 by 5.5. Scored in half to make it 4.25. There we go. I'm going to be adding momentarily this cardstock layer to the front. This is 5.25 by 4, and this is what we're going to glue our designer series paper on. I always like to do my gluing here before I put it on my card base. You do not need any fancy glue for this. Whatever your favorite type of glue is perfectly acceptable to use. Liquid glue, tear and tape, tape runner. I'm going to use my Stamp and Seal. So I always start with a big chunk of paper first. You simply need to do it and put it in one corner and give it a border around the edge. You don't want to go too wide because then the rest of your pieces won't fit. Next, I like to take the piece that's going to go right along the bottom. And if you are using a directional print, you want to be a little more careful when you're assembling to make sure your prints line up, otherwise it might look a little funny. This one being an all-over print, I don't really have to worry as much about that. That leaves us with this narrow part, and so we're going to put some glue on these other pieces. Now, I have found it doesn't really matter if you put the small chunk on the top or the bottom. It's whatever arrangement you like best. You might want to lay them out and look at them. I have found I like to do, in most cases, the small one here at the top. And again, I'm just lining up my corners and my borders. This is the trickiest one because you have more to line it up with, but again, still not very difficult. And just like that, I've got my card base just about done. A little bit of glue here as well. And then this can go on my card front. And then we're ready to work on the inside and decorate the front, just like that. So really, like I said, nothing to it. You've done all the hard work here. Sometimes coordinating the colors is even harder than the actual cutting. So to decorate the front, I am going to take some layered circles. These are from our Stitched Circles die set. It's one of my favorites in the catalog. And cherry cobbler ink. The stamp set I chose to use today is the Layering Leaves. And I simply chose it because these, the sentiment that I want to use for the front fits in the circle. But it does happen to be a favorite stamp set of mine. So I'm going to ink up my stamp with cherry cobbler. Normally I would grab a piece of foam for underneath a photopolymer stamp, but since I'm just using this one sentiment, I'm going to be brave tonight. I'm going to give it some nice pressure, and thankfully I didn't mess that up. I'm going to let this sit to the side just for 1 second, and while I have my ink out, I'm going to work on the inside of the card. Now, I mentioned that strip of paper earlier. I'm going to glue it in my card all in one chunk, just like this. But if you prefer, you can cut it into 2 and do one at the top and the bottom, or you could even put your chunk of paper down at the bottom as an accent. If you hate the look, you can go ahead and chuck that. Totally up to you. I'm going to wait a minute to glue it in though. First, I'm going to lay it at the top so I have an idea of where I want to stamp my inside sentiment, which is sending hugs. And I'm going to put that like that. Normally, I put a piece of basic white inside the card, but since this bubble bath is a nice light pink, I decided I was just going to roll with that on the inside. So again, a little bit of glue. And there's the inside of my card. So now I've just got to finish dressing up the front. These 2 circles I'm going to layer together. You can put everything flat on the front of your card, or you can pop more with dimensionals. I'm going to pop this circle here with dimensionals. Whoop. You can experiment with the item you have for the front. You could use an image, you can use words. You can put it wherever you like. I favor the bottom here. And this is perfectly lovely, and I could send the card out right now just like this, but I want to dress it up just a smidge more. So I'm going to do two things. First of all, I'm going to take the the punch that matched my stamp set. This is the bow punch and some garden green cardstock. And pop two of those, and I'm going to set aside my little buds for another project and use the larger leaf sprigs. I'm going to flip them over, and I'm going to use some glue dots to put these on. I happen to favor the leftovers from my paper pumpkin kit. If you have not checked out our paper pumpkin crafting kits, they are basically a craft kit in a box that comes to you once a month. It's a subscription. You can either do it month to month or 3, 6, or 12 months, but it's everything you need in one place to do a craft project in about half an hour. And I love it because you get little extra glue dots like this that I can use on other projects. So if you have any questions about that, be sure to let me know. But I'm simply going to take my little greenery sprigs. I put my glue dots down towards the bottom so that they will be hidden behind my sentiment. And then for one final touch, I'm going to add some iridescent rhinestones, just to add a little bit of glimmer. You can dress up your cards as much or as little as you like. All right, and there we go. So my card is done, and now the last finishing touch is to put together my envelope, and that is super simple. I just have a basic envelope. I pull open the flap, and I get as close to the edge of the envelope flap on on the 3 open sides, and then the crease as well. I love my glue, is so good it's sticking to my fingers. And then I simply take my chunk of designer series paper and line it up along that fold line, and then give it a nice press. And I mentioned earlier how you have a minute amount of waste. I am simply going to trim off the excess on the sides. I'm not even going to trim off this excess for the flap. I always tape my cards shut. I don't like that yucky glue taste. So look at my nice, clean envelope flap. One of the reasons I don't trim the excess is probably because I'm more likely to trim it crooked, trying to trim it off, than if I leave it alone. All right. Okay, so there is my card. Quick and simple, 1 6x6 sheet of paper. I want to show you, though, other ideas that I had so that you can dress up this simple technique. So I made this card in the portrait orientation. If you are careful with how you cut, you can switch the orientation to the landscape. And I'll show you in a minute why you need to be careful when you cut. And that's why I recommend when you start this technique, just use a non-directional paper just to get a feel for it. And then you can kind of if you want to pick a directional print, you've got a little more basis to go on and can just figure out how to do the cutting to make it work to your advantage. Hopefully that makes sense. All right. And then on the inside of this one with the landscape, I simply put the chunk of paper down the side and then put my sentiment off to one side as well. But you don't have to use circles. You can use different shapes. I also favor our double oval punch. It's a favorite of mine. And you can even take the same piece of cardstock and dress it up by using different colors of cardstock as your layers. Here's one example where I used the strip inside, but I cut it into 2 pieces for the top and the bottom. All right. Now, this is the one where I mentioned that directional paper coming into play. I made a Halloween card because we are coming up on Halloween, and the way I cut the paper, my bats are flying sideways on my envelope. So don't tell anybody. Really, it's not a big deal. This print isn't too bad, but I kind of know that they're flying sideways. Hopefully the card will distract from the fact that the bats are flying a little oddly. And so here's the front of the card. I used one of the stamped images for the set and die cut it. And then I will surprise my recipient with my little ghost inside. I just thought that was cute. You can also change up your card design by switching the placement of the paper. You don't have a lot of leeway, just given that you're trying to mat everything on a 5 1/4 by 4. But here I just switched the placement of the top and bottom pieces, and you could actually swap and do the narrow ones on the top and the larger ones on the bottom. Totally whatever works for you. Moving away from ovals, I used banners here on this one, and I really love this idea because I have this paper. This is all part of the same eclectic set. I didn't know what I was going to do with this paper with the pretzels on it. It's so cute, but I don't have the stamp set that we have that has a pretzel stamp in it. So I thought, how am I going to use this? Well, I took one 12 by 12 sheet and I cut it like this, and I've got 4 cards made and ready to go. And I love it. It just says smile because you're awesome. So I can't wait to send this to someone in the mail. So it's a great way to use up your paper. And then of course you've got those cute little envelope flaps, right? And then if you want to be really fancy, a very simple way to take this technique and step it up a notch is you can mix and match your papers. You could do it with 2 or with 4, which is what I'm going to show you in a minute. Everything else is the same. All the cutting measurements are the same, but you're going to take 4 coordinating prints of paper, and then you are going to just mix and match. I took 1 large chunk from each print, and then I just started swapping the other pieces until I was happy with how they looked. The sentiment pieces on the front are all the same, just each one on the inside has a different panel depending on what was left. And then of course I have 4 envelopes as well, and any of them would go with any of these cards. So it's just a really quick and simple way to take that plain, really not plain, but simple technique and just kind of step it up a notch. And I was really tickled that I got all 4 of these cards done with just 4 6x6 pieces of paper. All right, that is all for me today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed learning how to do this quick and simple 6x6 technique for 1 card and 1 envelope. If you have not already, I'd love for you to subscribe to this YouTube channel, and you can click the notification bell and be notified each time a video goes live here on the page. You can also hop over to Facebook if you're a fan of that. I'm the Faithful Stamper, and I do live videos there, and I share a lot more there about specials that Stampin' Up! Has and other things going on in the Stampin' Up! World. Thank you so much for watching. Take care and happy crafting.